Good morning, guys. As you see over here, we're going to be working with a series of videos that will explain to you the use of the different grammar structures that we have in the book. If you notice, right now we're going to jump into the Unit 21 of your book, that is Grammar and Beyond, and we're going to see the topic Advice and Suggestions. We have seen many times how we make advice or how we make suggestions to different people. But today we're going to see it in detail, and I hope this video will help you to clarify any question that you may have about the structure and how are you going to use it. First, we need to know the following. That first we have the advice. For advice, we're going to use the following structures that I should, oughta, had better, that are often used to give advice. But how come? For example, we have this little example over there that is, you should ask yourself exactly what you want from a job. You should ask yourself. When you are saying you should ask yourself what you want from a job, you're telling a person that they should consider first what they think that they need exactly from a job. What are we doing over here? We're giving an advice to someone, an advice on what they need to do or what they need to take into consideration to get a different job. This is a suggestion, this is an advice that you give to someone else. You had better make changes before you take a new job. You had better make changes before you take a new job. As you see over here, this is an advice that you make to a person, right? But what is the difference between should and had better? We're just going to see and just here in a second. Just bear with me for a moment. And we are going to go over the explanation and the grammar structure of each of them. So first, we're going to talk about the statements. How you make the statement, either the negative or the affirmative form. If you remember, a statement is a sentence that you make about something that you believe is right. So we're going to start in all of our subjects and all of our sentences with a subject, right? The subject over here that we have on the screen at the moment is I. Then we have the next one that is I. Then we have the modal verb, and in this case will be should. Then we have the verb in the base form, that is make. So remember that the verb in the base form is a verb that doesn't change at all. Doesn't have ing, doesn't have es, doesn't have the s, doesn't have ed. So it's a verb that you just keep it like normal. And then you have the following complement. That the complement can be whatever you want. You know that already, that you can add anything according to the sentence, that as long as it makes sense and it helps you out to convey that clear message. We have the first sentence and the first statement over here. I should make changes. This is a recommendation, a self-recommendation that you're making to yourself, right? Why should I make changes? Because maybe you need to improve in certain ways. You need to improve in certain different areas that you haven't covered yet. Then we have another example for the negative form. That is, in this case, the negative form, you see that the particle not will go after the word should. So in this case, you can say, I should not make changes, or I shouldn't make changes. Then we have oughta and ought not to. Had better and had not better, and I better not. We're going to see some examples with the other subjects. For example, we have he, she, or it can use any of these models. So you can say he should, she shouldn't, she oughta, he oughta not, etc., etc. Or we had better not, or we had better, or they had better not. It's really simple to use. As you see, there is not something where you're going to lose yourself. You just got to follow the structure. So you have the modal verb, then you have the particle not. Just in the case of oughta, that you're going to have out, then not in the middle, and then the particle to after that. But in the other cases, you will have the not after the modal verb. Now we're going to see the structure for the yes no questions and response. That is really simple. You see that first we're going to start with should. Should, then we're going to have the subject, the base form of the verb, as we say, that doesn't have any changes. Then a complement. Something that I want you to notice over here. The structure says that we're just going to use should to make questions. And in fact, every time that you want to make a question for an advice, like you are asking a person to give you an advice, you are only going to use should. You cannot use oughta, or you cannot use had better at the beginning of your question. Then you're going to make the responses. And how do we make the responses? Really simple. Then you can see over here that we can do it with all the subjects, and the responses are yes, you should, If I'm asking myself the question like, should I take a different job? I'm asking to a friend or to somebody that I trust on to give me a recommendation. And then they tell you, yes, you should. Or, yes, you should. No, you shouldn't. Or, no, she shouldn't. That is the negative form to answer, right? That is the way in which you tell a person that they shouldn't do something in the way that the recommendation is not good or the thing that they are going to do is not beneficial to them. Now we're going to move on to information questions. And what are information questions? Are questions that help you out to understand or to get extra information from the subject. So that means that in this case, not with just no questions, you will get a question like yes or no, like yes you should or no you shouldn't, as we saw in the last example. But over here, we're going to get more details, get more information from the person. We can use all the WH words, like for example, when, should I call? When should I call? You're asking this to a friend, to a family member, to somebody that's going to help you out to make the better decision, and you know that they are going to give you a really great advice. When should I call? So in this case, you're asking a person for a different opinion on something. Then, who, you, or who should you call? Who should he or she call? And who should we call? Who should they call? You can see that we are always going to use all the subjects. Simple structure to follow. Double H word, when or who. We're going to see the others just in a second. The should modal verb. After that, then we're going to have any of the subjects and the base form of the verb. If you want to add any complement, we're going to use the other way that, for example, what should come next? What should come next? In this case, you notice that here we are not going to use the subject of or subject in the sentence. Why? Because when we use the double H word what, we are not going to need it because we are asking exactly for something. Then we have who should come. In that case, obviously as well, you're not going to use the subject because you're asking for the person and you're asking for the thing. In that case, your answer will include the subject but not the question. Let's move on to the uses of should, oughta, had better for advice. Should and oughta are for general advice. What's a general advice? Something that you can tell to anyone. Like you should assess yourself before you look for a different job. This is a recommendation that you can give to anyone. Like you want to look for a job, then try to get extra information. Try to get for some person to guide you and to help you out to understand what you need. She oughta look for a new job. She should do it because maybe the job that she's into right now is not the best one, or she's having a lot of issues to understand what's happening in that job, and she needs a better position in a different kind of place. The next use is the use had better, not only for strong advice and warnings. Had better not is much stronger than should and oughta, and it suggests that something negative will happen if you don't take the advice. We usually only use it in speaking. Something that I want you to notice over here. Much stronger advice, and it suggests that something negative will happen if you don't follow the advice or if you follow the advice. So that means that in this case, when we are talking about had better, we're talking about consequences. Consequences that you may have for following an action or not following an action. We had the example, you had better finish this project or you may lose your job. You see over here that in this sentence we have the example and we have as well the consequence of what will happen if you don't finish the project. You will lose your job. That's a negative consequence. Something important to remember is that had better is can only be used in speaking. We are normally not going to use it in the written form, but it's more common to be used in the spoken form. You should in questions, out and had better are not common in questions. As I explained to you, should is the norm, should is the one that we're going to use to ask question like, should I ask the salary at the interview? In this case, you're asking for a recommendation or an advice. Use maybe or perhaps, what I think to soften the advice. This expression usually go at the beginning of the sentence. When we talk about softening the advice, it's like you don't want to appear like you're so rude to the person that you're giving advice. You want to appear like you're friendly, you want to do it with the best intention in the world because you want the best outcome for that person that you're giving advice. So in this case, we can use maybe or perhaps as you see in the examples at the beginning of the sentence. Maybe you should be more careful when you write your resume. Like, it's a recommendation, but it's something like you say, like, okay, you can try this, you can try it over. There is no problem with that, and that will help you out a little bit. I think he ought to look for a different job. In the case of I think, it's like you say it's your opinion. You are not telling somebody exactly what to do, but it's something that you think that could be beneficial for them. You can only use probably to soften the advice. It can go before or after should, or it goes before oughta. For example, you say she probably should take the job. She should probably take the job. You see over there that probably can be used as well to soften the advice. It can be used either before the modal verb or after the modal verb. So there's no problem where to place it, the intention and the meaning is not going to change. She probably ought to take the job or she ought to probably take the job. This is the only exception because in this case, when you're using oughta, you're going to use probably before the modal verb, not after it. So this is a piece of advice that should not is much more common than oughta not to, and can use should not in both speaking and writing. So normally when we're talking about written form, we're not using oughta not. We normally are going to use should not in the written form because it's the most commonly used, it's the most accepted by people, it's the one that they use the most. Now let's take out some examples with suggestions. We have might want to, could, why don't, doesn't, and why not are often used to make suggestions. But suggestions are not as strong as advice. Why are not suggestions as strong as advice? Because with a suggestion, you give your opinion and hope that somebody will accept it or not. But with an advice, you do it with the intention to persuade a person to do what you want them to because of their benefit or because you want to prevent them from something difficult or some possible problem that may come along the way. You have you may want to schedule your interview in the afternoon. That's a suggestion that you're telling a person like you can take this recommendation into account. That's up to you. Why don't you prepare questions for the interview? In this case, you see, you're giving a suggestion to somebody so they can follow it. When we are talking about suggestions with might, want, to, and could, we're going to follow this structure. First, we're going to have the subject, the modal verb. You see that might want to, in this case, is going to be together. They are not going to be separated. They are taken as just one modal verb. Then the base form of the verb, call, and the company. I may want to call the company, like giving a suggestion to myself. I may not want to call the company. You see over there that the negative form, we're going to have the particle not after the modal verb might. So in this case, that is the pattern that we should follow. I could call the company. You're talking about the possibility. We have seen many times how you can use code to talk about possibilities. So I could call the company. And we can use it as well with the plethora of subjects that we have in the English form. So suggestions with why don't or doesn't it. When we are using why don't or doesn't it, it's like when we are talking in Spanish and we're making questions like ¿por qué no? Or ¿qué tal si? So that is the meaning. We're going to always have why don't or doesn't at the beginning of the sentence, and then we're going to have any subject. Why don't I ask? Like, for example, if you are trying to talk with somebody, like it's attractive to you, and you want to ask her out on a date or ask him out on a date, and then you say, why don't I ask? I just go there and ask for the date. Maybe what can go wrong? Then you can use as well the other subjects like you, we, they, etc. But remember that when we are talking about these kind of verbs, remember that don't is used just for the first person of the singular form or first, second, and third person of the plural form. But when we're talking about he, she, or it, that are the third person singular, we're going to use why doesn't. Why doesn't he ask? Why doesn't she ask? Why doesn't it ask? Etc. Now suggestion why not. Why not at the beginning, then we have the base form of the verb, and then we have the complement. Why not buy a new suit for the interview? Or we can have some other examples of why not talk to her in person? Why not ask the teacher about any doubt that you have from the class? So you see that we'll always follow this pattern. Why not at the beginning, the base form of the verb, and any complement you want. And then we have making suggestions with these kinds of modal verbs. You may want to include to make suggestions. They often express a choice of possible actions. So as I was telling you at the beginning, the difference between an advice and a suggestion it gives you the options, right? It's an alternative that you can take, that somebody can take into consideration. We have the examples. You may schedule your interview in the morning, or you could wait until the afternoon. You are giving over here, we're using both of them together to give an opinion or a choice to somebody. Then we have might is often with want to, often used with want to. In this case, you may want to think about volunteer work. As I was explaining to you, we're going to always use them together, not separately. You may not want to ask questions in an interview. That's the negative form, not before the want to and after might. Not use could in negative suggestions, use might, not want to. So when you're making a negative suggestions like this one, like you could not ask the questions in an interview, that is incorrect. That is incorrect because the written pattern that we're going to use for that is might not want to. Why not and why don't or doesn't are both questions forms and end with a question mark. Why don't you prepare questions for your interview? As I explained to you, since they are questions, we obviously know that they always end in a question mark. Why don't and why doesn't and why not are very common in conversation, but they are normally done using academic writing. Why not? Because they have the contracted form or do and does. So in this case, that means that they are less formal. And in academic writing, we're talking about a letter, we're talking about an article, we're talking about a paragraph for the class, we're talking about an essay, etc. You are never going to use this form because they use the contracted form and therefore they are more informal. Say, why don't you practice for the interview? Right? Interviewers may want to practice for their interviews. And that's the end of the grammar explanation. I hope that it helps you to clarify the doubts on how to use the structure. If you have any question, you can post it in the comments on the platform and I will gladly answer all of your questions just in a moment to make sure that you understood completely. Thank you very much for your attention.